Hello, dog lovers. Have you ever wondered how search and rescuers are able to find survivors so fast and accurately? Well, I'm here to tell you they have one special tool that they use. And based on the image to your right, you probably guessed it. It's dogs. Dogs are used in search and rescue all the time. But first, before we learn about how dogs are used in search and rescue, we must understand what search and rescue is first. So search and rescue is the global coordinated effort to locate missing or trapped people after disasters. Disasters such as natural ones, like volcanoes or landslides, or human-made ones, like a terrorist attack. But regardless of the reason, search and rescue is there to help find people and rescue them. But you may be wondering what the main goal of search and rescue is. Obviously, it's to search and rescue for people, but there is another thing that is most important for search and rescuers when they are trying to rescue people, and that is time. Time is what they fight against. Time is what they want to reduce. The time to find people, that is. Since as time goes on, you are going to be less likely to find people alive. And this is what one article found. This article being Indicators for Post-Disaster Search and Rescue Efficiency, developed using progressive death tolls, written by Chiu et al. 2022. And the entire point of this article was just mainly to identify key elements that influence successful life rescues after earthquakes, specifically time to rescue as a primary survival determinant, but it also looked at different factors that impacted survival. And so what they found, and what's very important to this discussion, is that after a certain amount of time, the amount of people found alive versus the amount of people found dead will steadily go down after the days. And as you can see on the right from an excerpt from the article, it states that the survival ratio of people rescued within 24 hours of an earthquake is 74%. So within the first day, the amount of people who will be found alive will be around 74%. And then when we get into the third day, the survival ratio goes down to 22%. So only 22% of people are likely to be found on the third day. And then obviously on the fifth day, we go all the way down to 6%. So only a small 6% of people found on the fifth day will be people who are found alive. And given this statistic, it is very important for search and rescue teams to find people within the first 72 hours, as noted by the article by Chiu et al. Now that we know really what search and rescue is about, and what they're really trying to do, and what their main goal is, now we can talk about the role of dogs in finding people as fast as possible within those 72 hours. And so dogs play a very important role in finding people as fast as possible. And you may be wondering, how? What really could their role be? How can help find people as fast as possible? Well, as you may know, dogs are deployed in the field to find people beneath rubble or other debris, and the main reason is because of their detection prowess. They're able to detect people that are under the rubble, and they're able to interact with humans well enough that they can signal to rescuers that someone is underneath a certain pile of rubble or any other debris. And so there are three main attributes of dogs that allow them to carry out this function of being basically living scent detectors. So these three functions are their olfactory system, their physical resilience and mobility, their behavioral cooperation and trainability. And so these three factors on their own are not that unique. Many animals have good senses of smell, good physical prowess. And some animals, especially like farm animals, have good behavior. They can work well with humans, since they are domesticated animals. So what makes dogs specifically the go-to pick for search and rescue? Well, the main thing is the combination of all three. I mean, many animals are good in one or two of these categories, but dogs are the only one that can excel in all three, which is what makes them so unique and so well fitted to find people while working in a team. And so this kind of sentiment echoed by one study done by Vladimir Cvetković and Nemanja Miljković, study that they produced was able to move beyond anecdotal claims about search and rescue dog performance by employing a rigorous experimental framework in realistic terrain conditions. And so the main goal of this study was to quantify how effective low altitude ground search and rescue dogs are by measuring their hit and miss rate, coverage distance, speeds, and how these coverage compare to human handlers, so that SAR planners and handlers could base deployment strategies on empirical data. So basically just looking at the effectiveness of search and rescue dogs, what makes them effective, and kind of the training and the environments that they excel at, and how they excel at those things, and what kind of influence the effectiveness of these dogs in search and rescue. And so what they found is that they found that search and rescue dogs greatly enhanced the efficiency of disaster response operations, and they found that the superior sense of smell, agility, and ability to maneuver through complex terrains made them crucial for quickly locating survivors. So echoing that sentiment that dogs help lower the time to find people within that golden hour of 72 hours when the most people will be found alive. And so we can see how the scientific literature helps support how dogs are very important when it comes to finding people. And then this is just another part of the same article that shows that dogs are a crucial part of search and rescue teams, especially in the 3 countries mentioned, which is where the studies took place. And they mention how the remarkable ability to swiftly and efficiently locate survivors makes them indispensable for saving lives. So this article basically emphasizes the point that dogs are very important. But now we can find out exactly what makes them important and exactly why they're chosen in the 3 categories. And so we will start off with their smell. What makes their sense of smell so well suited to find people under rubble or any other dangerous conditions, and what allows them to keep going even when there's very toxic compounds that are hard to breathe in? Well, before we discover what exactly makes their nose so special, we must look at one scientific article that looks at the exact same thing. This article being When the Nose Doesn't Know, and it's all about canine olfactory function, or their sense of smell. And so this article covers many of the aspects that make them good search and rescue dogs. Even though it doesn't explicitly cover search and rescue, it does cover many of the aspects of their nose that do help find people. And so one of the first things that this article mentions is the amount of olfactory receptors in the canine nasal cavity. And so according to the article, there are more than 220 million olfactory receptors in the canine nasal cavity. This is important because all these receptors are able to collect the different scent particles. These receptors are all the different parts of the dog's nose on the inside that are able to process the scents and send it to the brain where it can be analyzed, and they can use that information to find out where the people are trapped in. And so this fact is really important because humans only have about 5 million olfactory receptors. So this heightened amount of receptors allows them to smell way more and be a lot more analytical with their nose. But beyond the number of receptors in their noses, there is another finding from this article. And I didn't mention this earlier, but this article is a narrative review. So this article has pulled data from many studies in many different fields of research surrounding dogs. And so it synthesizes findings from all over the articles and synthesizes them into one paper and puts together all the information to come to a conclusion. And so having that in mind, we kind of know how they came to this conclusion. They pulled this information likely from many different articles that said that dogs have 220 million olfactory receptors. But beyond just having 220 million olfactory receptors, dogs, and dogs specifically, have a very unique way of smelling, since when they sniff, they split airflow. So what does this mean? This means that dogs don't just breathe, they sniff. And they sniff in short bursts of 4 to 7 sniffs per second. And so these bursts of sniffing send part of the airflow to the lungs. and then the rest of it is sent to the smell part of the nose, or the olfactory receptors. And so it does give an exact metric in this article. During inspiration, 12 to 13% of the airflow travels to the olfactory portion of the nose. So that means 12 to 13% of all air they breathe in goes to those little receptors that into the brain for them to analyze. And so a lot of the air they breathe in is stuff they're analyzing. They're analyzing scents from most of the air they breathe. And so this makes them very reliable in search and rescue because they breathe in short bursts and pick up someone's scent, even from under rubble. And there is a reason why they're able to pick up scents, even if there's a bunch of rubble or dust. But we'll get into why they're able to pick up such a small amount of scent, even when there's a lot of other scents. But for now, what is important is that dogs are able to breathe in while also having a different stream of airflow for actually collecting scent. And so another thing that makes dogs very important and useful in terms of their smelling abilities is how each nostril samples independently. So their right nostril and their left nostril. And so they have something which is called stereo smelling. And so stereo smelling allows dogs to pull air from the left and the right separately. And so they can detect what direction air is coming from and what direction scent is coming from. Because this side of the nose pulls in only air from this side, and this side of the nose pulls in only air from this side. So they can tell what direction scent is in, which, I mean, you could probably guess that's important, because then they can tell what direction someone is in based on the scent of that person. So obviously it's very important when trying to find people amongst seas of rubble and destruction. And you can see that on the article from the right, from the same article about the dog's olfactory capabilities. But another important part of a dog's nose is the olfactory bulb, which does connect back to the olfactory receptors, because the olfactory receptors feed into the bulb. And the reason this is because these receptors are packed into a larger smelling surface, which is the inside of their nose. And so when scents are picked up by these receptors, they send the signal of the scents to the olfactory bulb. And this olfactory bulb amplifies the smell information, since the olfactory bulb is around here near the back of the head, near the back of the snout, right below where the eyes would be. And so the olfactory bulb basically lets them retain the information, which is why they're able to track someone's scent for so long, since it's stored in the bulb. And the bulb is able to kind of translate the information into what the scent means, which is usually that someone is somewhere nearby. And you can see one part of that quote on the right side of the screen in the article, where it says that compared to humans, dogs have significantly larger surface area of olfactory epithelium, with approximately 30% more ORs that can recognize a much larger variety of odorants. And so that's one part of how the olfactory bulb is larger, but we can also see this more clearly in another part of the same article, where they say that there are approximately 1,000 ORC axons per second order neuron, resulting in significant amplification of the odor signal, with the myrtle cells of the olfactory bulb projecting one primary dendrite to one glomerulus and one axon to the olfactory cortex. So this bulb is basically able to amplify the odor signal so the dog knows what they're looking for, and they're fine-tuned to that one specific signal out of all the different signals and senses. And then beyond just having a big olfactory bulb, they can also detect odors out of many different odors. As shown in the article, dogs can detect one specific particle out of that trillion, since they specifically say that the canine's capacity for odor detection has been reported to be as much as 10,000 to 100 times that of an average human, and the canine lower limit of detectability for volatile organic compounds is 1 part per trillion. And so to put that in perspective, that means for every trillion particles, they can sniff out one specific particle from those a trillion particles. So they are able to sniff out that one little scent of human out of all the different scents of food or dust or decomposition. So this is one of the most important factors, honestly, in the dog's nose. And if you take anything away from this section of the video, is that dogs are able to smell one little scent out of a sea of scents during the disaster. And so that's how they're able to pick out a human from rubble, is that they pick up the odor from the millions and trillions of compounds in the air. And you can see that in the article on the right. And then beyond that, dogs also have something called vomeronasal organ, which can detect specifically non-volatile human compounds like skin microbiomes or decomposition markers. And so this organ picks up heavier, less volatile chemical signals, including communication signals and some body chemistry cues that humans basically miss. So they can kind of pick up the different chemicals from someone's body that they exude when they're doing certain activities. And so this kind of amplification of scent through this kind of increased capacity for smelling invisible odors in the vomeronasal organ makes them very important, since this organ helps them smell different compounds that we can't smell that can help them detect where human is. And so now we kind of know how the nose helps find people. So the nose has various amounts of receptors that allow them to pick up scents, and then they have an olfactory bulb which allows them to retain and amplify that scent, and they're able to detect one tiny scent particle out of a trillion other tiny scent particles, which is why they're able to specifically detect human scent and find humans. That is the most important part of how dogs are helpful to search and rescue, is their nose. But there are more minute details in the physical and behavioral abilities of dogs that do still help them in search and rescue, but they more combine with their ability to smell, since that's the main reason why they're used. And so the next thing we can focus on is their physical abilities. But here's just a kind of model of the dog's nose and how it shows each organ that allows them to detect scents that we usually wouldn't be able to detect. And so you can see the olfactory bulb in the back, and you can also see the vomeronasal organ here in the blue right under their actual nose. But there is another important article beyond the one about noses, because this one is about animal welfare of working dogs and current perspectives on recent advances and future directions. The main point of this article was to review the scientific research on the physical, physiological, and environmental demands placed on working dogs, including detection, patrol, and search and rescue. The goal was to examine how exercise, heat exposure, hydration, metabolic output, and environmental conditions influence the physical performance and resilience of dogs working in operational roles. And then another purpose was to identify factors that preserve performance and welfare. And so the main point was just looking at the physical abilities of dogs and their physical welfare and how they're able to sustain work during search and rescue or other jobs that require dogs to be physical. And so one of the most important findings for search and rescue specifically, and specifically for our purposes, how they're able to sustain performance, is that they found that during activity, working dogs were reported to maintain and recover from body temperatures above 41.1 degrees Celsius without evidence of heat or injury. And if you know anything about heat strokes or how much heat an animal can handle, you might know that 41 degrees Celsius or 106 degrees Fahrenheit is very hot, especially to be working in. And so the fact that dogs can maintain their kind of work ethic even in these very hot conditions is very, very helpful because if they're searching for people in rubble and it's the summer, they're going to be getting very hot. So the fact that they're able to maintain their kind of activity and are able to recover from any damages sustained from being in the heat so long is very important, since it makes them very resilient tools that can be used without being injured or being maimed or anything like that. So their resistance to temperatures is important, since they can be out on the field longer, and if they're out on the field longer, then ergo, their nose is more likely to find someone, rather than if they take a lot of breaks and the scent leaves their nose. And then beyond just being able to... And there's more than that, and this is actually a very helpful article made by Cobb and Otto in 2021. So this article that they made is really important for physical capabilities. There's a lot more interesting information about like the welfare of search and rescue dogs, but we aren't really talking about the we're not really talking about the welfare of search and rescue dogs in this video, but it is an important article and it's very cool if you want to go and look at it. But beyond just sustained work capacity, dogs also have paws that are built for the job. And this is shown in how does the canine paw attenuate ground impacts? So how does it respond? How does it absorb impacts from the ground, like falling or impacts from rubble, sharp rocks, etc. So this article was made by Meow et al. In 2017. And so this article specifically aimed to determine how the canine paw pad absorbed impact forces and provided traction during locomotion. They sought to characterize the paw pad's microstructural and mechanical properties to understand how dogs maintain stability, reduce impact shock, and generate friction across varied terrains. And they're able to do this by a combination of mechanical testing, histological analysis, so looking at the history, and then dynamic impact experiments. And so they used paw pad samples from canines, which were analyzed, and they also looked at histological staining and microscopy, which were used to identify key patterns within the paw. So they were looking at the actual paw in different like paw fossils. And so just looking at dogs' feet, but beyond just looking at dogs' feet, they did find really important information about the dog's paws, which is also really important for search and rescue, because those paws will be on hard surfaces all day and they might have to jump up or jump down from a surface. Who knows what could be out in a disaster? And so, as you can see from this specific section, the reason why dogs' paws are built for searching and rescuing in dangerous conditions is because the dog's paws are built to grip and cushion, with the pad layers being able to absorb impact, spread the force, and help them stand, climb, and land safely on uneven surfaces that you would find in a disaster like rubble. And the specific quote here that is helpful is that the article found that the digitigrade paw pad consisted of a multi-layered structure the dermis can store, release, and dissipate impact energy. There's another as well that says that the paw pad's microstructure effectively attenuated the ground impact across an impact velocity of 0.05 to 0.04 meters, which you can also see on the right and read a little bit more of. But all you need to know is that paws can absorb a lot of impact, either from falling or walking over rough surfaces. So they're made to help them not get hurt when they're walking over really rough surfaces, like after a disaster. And beyond this, dogs' bodies in general are also just built for disaster scenarios and navigating dangerous conditions. And this was found by another article. And here's a image from Meow et al. Showing the structure of paw pads. But beyond just paws, we do have the actual locomotion and the body structure. And that is something that Gillette et al. Looked into And Gillette et al. Is a study that set out to present a scientific framework for analyzing canine locomotion using principles of biomechanics, neuromuscular control, and gait assessment. The authors sought to describe how the canine musculoskeletal and nervous systems interact during movement, and how dogs manage balance, propulsion, and load distribution during various gaits and terrain conditions. And so they were able to use consolidated data from motion capture studies, force plate analysis, electromyographic recordings, and kinematic models. So there are many different models and studies that they use to kind of determine the physical structure of dogs and their structural framework. And so what's important for us to really understand, though, is how dogs are able to quickly adjust their footing when the environment changes, such as a rock falling or the debris shifting. Their limbs, gait, and low center of gravity also give them stability on harsh slopes that could be found during a disaster. And this is shown in the quote from the article by Gillette et al. And this quote basically says, locomotion depends on sensory input. The skeletal segments and joints of the quadruped are repetitively accelerated, decelerated, and loaded with various force magnitudes. So they are able to withstand force and stress, and they're able to adjust quickly due to how fast they're able to load and how fast they are able to accelerate and decelerate. And the article also kind of goes over their structural design, which allows them to have more agility and coordination. Since dogs are built to turn, scramble, climb, and leap, and their musculoskeletal system supports powerful bursts, quick direction changes, and coordination under dynamic conditions, which helps them stay focused and balanced during certain rescue operations. And this can also be shown in the article. In the previous slide, it was shown in the article through the quotes. And one of these quotes is that the musculoskeletal system is constantly distributing body weight, absorbing forces, maintaining posture, maintaining balance, and transferring the center of gravity over to base support. So the skeletal system of dogs is basically just constantly making sure the body's balanced, which is important when you're on unstable terrain. And so beyond this, we have finally the behavioral traits. So you have learned how the dogs use their noses and how dogs use their noses to find people as fast as possible, and how dogs use their bodies to stay stable and safe when finding people. But now, how does their behavior help them find people? Because you may understand the physical and the smelling part. Yeah, obviously they're going to be able to use their nose to find people. Obviously they're going to be able to use their body structure to be able to safely traverse dangerous environments in which disasters happen. Obviously, like I know how dogs would probably use their nose or body to help, right? But you may not know how behavior plays a role in their success. And there is one article that basically, there is an article that exactly discovers that and researches that. And that article is this one on the right, made by Hiroshi et al. And this article was written not too long ago. It was written in 2013, which actually is a long time ago now, but is still relevant today, since dogs have not changed that much since 2013, as you might have guessed. And so one of the biggest factors of dogs' behavior is their four-part search behavior, which is what this article shows. Since this article is all about analyzing how behavior, cognition, personality, training, environment, and handler factors influence whether detection dogs successfully train and perform in the field. So this article, unlike some of the other articles, focuses specifically on search and rescue dogs. So it's very relevant to this topic. And if you want to learn more, this is such a great article to look at how dogs work in terms of search and rescue. But what is important right now is the four-part search behavior that dogs have. And as you can see by the article passage on the right from Hiroshi et al., you can see that the scent detection exercise can be divided into 4 key performance tasks. Why 4 key performance tasks? Because these are the 4 key tasks that dogs would have to do on the field. And if they're not able to perform them well, they're not going to be good search and rescue dogs. And these are different tasks that dogs specifically can do really well and have the potential to do really well. So one of these is search an area, indicated by its handler. Obviously, if a dog is going to be searching for people, it's going to have to be able to search an area. Locate the target odors. Locate people. Follow the target odor to its source. So it's one thing to locate the odor, but you have to be able to know where it is and follow the odor to the source to find the actual person. So locating the target odor is just smelling the person's scent. And then they have to follow that scent to the person itself. And so that's kind of how scent detection works in the olfactory system. And then finally, reliably alert the source of the odor without alerting to non-target sources. And so this is just, can the dog alert the rescuers to the source without alerting to a different source, like food or something they don't really care about since they're trying to save people. And so this is a really important part, since this is kind of how dogs behaviorally find people and how they're able to find people through habit, training, and behavior, since they're trained to follow these tasks and do these tasks no matter what. And beyond this search behavior, the personality traits of successful detection dogs are motivation, boldness, and stress coping. And these traits that dogs can have are very important. Why? Well, first, let's actually look at what the article has to say about this. So the article mainly says, well, what I just said, the different traits that make dogs successful. And then it also mentions that dogs need to be cooperative with the trainer, which plays into trainability. Dogs have to be able and willing to cooperate with the trainer to find people, because a dog might be able to find someone, but the dog's not going to be the one to dig up the person. It's going to be the handler or the handler's team. And so these factors are also important in that aspect. Why? Well, it's because, firstly, a strong motivation to play or search. They need to be motivated. If they're not motivated to play or search or just to find people, then they're not going to try to find people as hard, and it's going to be a lot harder to find people quickly. And in boldness, they're able to go into environments that we humans would consider dangerous without a second thought. And then the ability to adapt and cope with stress. Humans, we get stressed a lot. Sometimes we can't cope with it. Dogs are very good at coping with stress, which is why they don't freak out as much when they're in stressful situations, such as in a disaster scenario. But beyond these successful personality traits, they also have persistence and search motivation in low reward environments, which also is shown in the study by Troy et al. And so the main thing that they found in terms of persistence and search motivation is that, so they observed that in many situations, the probability of finding target odors is low. Obviously, you're not always going to find people. Even if you smell a person, you may not find someone alive or someone who is still there, because scents can linger. So it could be someone who was there but is not there anymore. And so if a dog continually searches without finding any odors, it may decrease its search behavior unless properly reinforced during training. This also kind of reinforces the fact dogs are good at being trained. They have high trainability. Since if they're not trained, as supported by this article on the right, they will just stop searching an area if they don't detect any odors within a certain amount of time, which is not good because you want them to search an area for a long time just in case someone is hidden really deep underneath any rubble or other materials. So it's really important that dogs are able to be trained fairly easily, since you can train them to be able to search an area for a longer amount of time, even when they don't actually detect any scents. And so that'll allow them to actually find people faster, since they're not just abandoning an area, even if a person may be there, just a little deeper and might need more time to pick up the scent. But beyond just this kind of ability to persist and keep going, even when there's really no other reason to keep going, at least to a human, they keep going, which is important for finding people in that 72 hours. And so beyond this, also sensitivity to human cues. So dogs are very sensitive to human cues, such as where the handler looks, moves, or tenses. But in SAR, they also have to make independent decisions and not just follow orders. Good teams balance guidance with dog autonomy. And so this also shows one of dogs' other behavioral traits that make them so good is their ability to work with people, but also work on their own. Because they have to work with the dog teams to find people, and then alert the teams so that they can actually save the person. However, they must work on their own sometimes when they need to fit into small places that the human can't, and some other scenarios where dogs have to take the lead and use their own intuition. And that's another thing. They have intuition. They can kind of make their own choices based on their own kind of limited, simplified thoughts. And so this is supported by the quote from the highlighted section of the aforementioned Trosi et al. Article. And so it says that further controlling arousal in the field might also be important to minimize the risks, as well as establishing the optimal balance between independent problem solving and reliance on handler given cues. Dogs are sensitive to human cues, but it is essential for dogs to retain a degree of independence, and training programs should reinforce that independence. Therefore, there is also a need to improve the training of handlers to reduce the tendency of them to force an alert from their dogs. So the main thing to take away from this is that dogs are good at working on their own while also working with people. So if the handler makes a mistake, the dogs can make their own choices to make the right choice. And so that's very important to the dog's success. And then finally, positive reinforcement handler relationships. This kind of goes with everything I've said before in this section, but dogs are very susceptible to positive reinforcement in their relationship with their handlers. Dogs are able to be trained and they're able to form bonds, and these are bonds that have been formed over billions of years because of evolution and domestication. And this allows dogs to closely work with humans and humans to closely work with dogs to find people without getting depressed and without getting off track, and kind of keeping each other in check through each other's unique abilities. The dog abilities, as we've already said, and the human abilities, which we have some that do help us, like we have opposable thumbs. We can pick up tools and actually get people out of rubble. So it's kind of that dynamic between humans and dogs specifically, rather than any other animal, that makes dogs so special. I think is the biggest thing, aside from smell, that helps them succeed, is their relationship with us. Because no other animal really has the same relationship with us that makes communication possible in these kind of high-stress situations. Because other animals would freak out, not listen, etc. But dogs are still able to communicate with us and listen to us in stressful situations such as this, or such as any disaster. And so that's cool and all. We finally have that part finished. We know why. We know why dogs are used and why they're successful. How they use their nose, how they use their bodies, and how they use their relationship with us and their own behaviors to help find people as fast as possible. But now we must ask ourselves, when have they succeeded? Because now we know how in theory they can succeed. But are there situations where dogs have been used and they succeeded or they helped? Yes, there is actually. There's two big examples. One recently, one from the not so distant past, which is very infamous. You probably know where I'm going with this one. One of the biggest examples of where dogs were used to find people was during 9/11. So as you know, 9/11 was an event that happened during September 11th, 2001. And there's a lot of politics with that, but we don't care about the politics. We care about the dogs. And so in this situation, many dogs were deployed to New York from all over the world. Many countries, such as Canada, Mexico, and some others in Europe, sent search and rescue teams with their dogs to help find people. And so there are many examples of many brave dogs that helped during that day and that helped save people before they expired. But I can only have time for one, sadly. I would show you all the dogs if I could. But here is one. Here is Apollo. And this is from a pet blog site, and all these sources I will post in the description, and all the sources will also be posted on the end slide for you to go search. And so this is a part of a dog blog that was commemorating 9/11. And so Apollo was a German Shepherd who worked with the first New York Police Department Canine Urban Search and Rescue Team. Apollo and his handler, Pete Davis, arrived at the South Tower just 15 minutes after it collapsed, making them the first team to arrive. And so I think the most important part of this example is that the German Shepherd and the handler spent 18 hours continuously searching for survivors. And this kind of highlights the earlier point of endurance. This dog here, this specific one, was able to endure 18 hours. And many of the other dogs during 9/11 also searched in similar conditions for a similar amount of time. And then you can also see the resilience, because in this specific story, this dog, Apollo, almost lost his life to flames and falling debris. But just by a stroke of luck, he was soaking wet from falling in a pool of water and was narrowly missed. And then he went right back to work, and that shows the resilience of dogs. He almost died and went straight back to work finding people. And so that kind of shows how search and rescue dogs like Apollo are so successful. They're resilient even in these dangerous environments like during 9/11. And then there's another source, and this one comes straight from the BBC, and this is a day after the actual event happened. And it's the Turkey earthquakes of 2023. So this BBC article was posted right after the disaster by Vanessa Buschletter. And so this article details dogs that were sent from Mexico to Turkey to help in search and rescue operations. This article detailed how Mexico was not the only country to send dogs to help in the rescue efforts. Many countries sent dogs, and this kind of shows why dogs are so helpful and important. Because if they weren't helpful and if they weren't important, do you think all these big first world countries would be sending dogs to help Turkey? No. If dogs were not important or helpful in search and rescue, they would not have been sent to such a big disaster. But they were. And that kind of underlines why they're so important and how utilized they are. And so the animals were used in areas with heavy risk of machinery, and the dogs were trained to sniff out humans and alert their handlers by barking and scratching the ground where the smell is strongest. Yet again, this kind of shows why dogs are successful. They're able to sniff out these human smells and then able to give a clear sign that they found someone. And then at the end, it says that Mexican officials say their mission is to save lives, and while the dogs can detect the smell of bodies as well as those who are buried under the rubble alive, the hope is that their quick deployment will result in rescues rather than recoveries. What they meant by this is that they hoped that deployment of dogs would actually result in alive people being found rather than recovering dead bodies. And so that kind of echoes the sentiment that dogs can find people fast, because they're sending dogs there to find people fast and find them before it becomes a recovery of a dead body. And so these two articles kind of show the cultural significance of dogs in search and rescue, because they are valued for their hard work in search and rescue. That's why they're utilized so often. And these dogs that are deployed aren't just like one or two breeds. Like German Shepherds are not the only breeds that are used in search and rescue. There are many other breeds that can be used. Like the dogs that were sent to Mexico were composed of many different types of dogs. If you remember in the beginning of this video, a little pop quiz, but in the beginning of the video, the first slide with the two images, there was an image with a plane with a bunch of dogs in front of it. That was the plane that was carrying these dogs to Turkey. And from that image, you can see a wide variety of dogs sitting in front of the plane. And so that kind of shows how search and rescue is something that all dogs are suited for. It's something that dogs, specifically as a species, can achieve, and something that they are well suited to do. The main things that you should take away from this video are that search and rescue prioritizes finding people as fast as possible, and in doing so, they use dogs, because dogs can help them find people as soon as possible before 72 hours, because 72 hours is the golden time in which search and rescuers can find people alive rather than dead. And then you should also take away that dogs use their smell, their physical prowess, and their behavior all together. They combine all these abilities together to help find people and work with human teams to find and rescue people before it's too late. And it's not just one breed or two breeds of dogs that do this. All dogs can go into search and rescue. All dogs have the ability to smell, because olfactory is a kind of universal dog trait that dogs excel in general, not just breed specific. So next time you look at a dog, maybe in the park, maybe in a store, maybe in your own home, maybe you have a dog. Maybe instead of looking at your dog as just this little animal that sits on your couch all day and eats your food and drinks your water, you can look at your dog as a hero, or as an animal that comes from a species of heroes that helps save people almost every day. And that's important. So next time you see your dog, give that good boy or good girl a treat for all the hard work that their brothers, sisters, cousins, and distant related family members in the species of Canis familiaris do on a daily basis to save us humans from rubble and from disasters. Thank you, and have a blessed Thanksgiving. Yeehaw!